Hey everybody, my name is Lucas Gatto and I'm a Technology Integration Specialist in Alexandria, Minnesota. Right now, we have something kind of crazy going on with this COVID-19 and how this is affecting K-12 education across the world. But what I want to talk about a little bit is what it really means to create quality digital content and how this might be able to help you in your classrooms. And this is not only just for COVID-19, this would also be at any time that you're setting up digital content. But I thought it fitting right now to throw this together and send this out to you in case it might be a resource for you. If you want the presentation that I'm going to be doing, it's in the bottom left-hand corner of the screen right now with that bit.ly link. Take that. You can use that. You can make a copy of it, edit how you see fit. Whatever you want to do, I just hope that it helps. So with that, we'll get rocking. So the first thing that's on the slide is about the SAMR model. You may or may not be familiar at all with the SAMR model in general, but what it does is it's kind of the like the holy grail of of integrating technology into the classroom. And so substitution's at the very bottom with redefinition at the very top. And what that means is that no matter what's happening, no matter what you're doing, if you're just substituting something into your lessons, it's serving no functional change in what you're trying to do with or without technology. So a paper is still a paper. A worksheet is still a worksheet, whether you're using Seesaw or Schoology or something. If you're writing a paper by hand, if you're typing it, that's not changing what you're actually trying to do. So what we're going to focus on is try to move those up the rings to redefinition. And that really highlights about something that we've never been able to do before, previously inconceivable, and where students are really focusing on curation and creation of new tasks and different learning. So that could be using Seesaw, using Schoology, using WeVideo, Newsela, and all these different apps that help students create and really take the driver's seat to their own learning. That's what we're trying to get to. So there's a couple more examples here for you that I have inside the slide deck. This one's about a geography lesson where the original assignment was about an overview of a location consisting of handwritten content supplemented with compiled cut and paste magazine clippings. I think we've all been there, we've all done that before. But what I want to do is read through that list and talk about how we can make this a little bit different. So all the way down to redefinition, you're using Google Earth, probably creating mind maps and different things like that, where the students have really taken the ownership in their learning. I'll let you do this by yourself though, as I want to save on time. I have one more example in there about Phi-Ed, and that one's pretty cool. So if you have a minute, use that link at the start of the presentation and check that out. And then lastly, this picture has been one of the best ones for me to show people to help with this. And so we know for sure that the old traditional way of teaching is not the best way to reach kids today. That can include standing in front of the classroom and lecturing, having the homework assignments do this, 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 and this. Kids don't learn that way anymore, and we need to make sure that we think about that when we're making lesson plans for today. On that other note, we also know that only using technology solely is not the best way to learn either. So it really winds up somewhere in the middle with a blended learning model. So we're using technology to create those previously inconceivable things before for students, knowing that the teacher is always going to be an extremely valued and important part of the learning process for students. So this infographic, hopefully that helps make you see it a little bit better. It's definitely been the best one that I've found. If you have any other questions, you can certainly find stuff on SAMR on Google very, very easily. So let's actually get into this a little bit more here. So whenever you're creating something online for digital content, there's three main steps to consider. You need to explain, create, and share. Short, simple, sweet, to the point. In this this slide deck was actually made with about 20 other technology integrationists around the state of Minnesota. So we did spend a lot of time on this, actually this last summer, related to our e-learning days with all the snow days that we were having. And it applies perfectly to right now as well. So I'm glad that we already had this resource. Thank you to everyone who helped on this. It is much appreciated. But back to the presentation. So creating quality digital content. The first thing is always the first thing. What are you going to explain to the kids? That's where your objectives come in. So it can be a little time for a little lecture, giving them some background, giving them some details. What are the things that they need to do in order to be successful for class that day? And that often includes some kind of hook, something that engages them, captivates their attention, so they're ready to be learning with you in that classroom environment. And then it's time to create. And so creating means students need to be working on some sort of classroom objective. It's researching for an assignment, researching for a presentation, researching, working on those math problems, doing their writing, their fiction writings, all those types of things. Students need to have a step of creating, in order to really engage in that learning. It also will help them explore and understand what they're doing. And so that's really important to remember. And then the last step, pretty simple one, is share. Making sure that students have a place to share. And now, as I'm making this during the COVID-19 global pandemic, sharing is going to be more important than ever, especially in the K-12 education environment. The reason why that's so important is humans are incredibly social by nature, and we're worried about the mental health of students and staff and parents and families because this isolation um, and loneliness is something that we've never had to experience before, at least not in anybody's lifetime that's living right now. And so having these connections, having my face in the corner while I'm explaining this to you, if that's a student, so they can see each other, you as the teacher leading through like a Google Hangout or something, will be really, really important to be able to see people, connect with people, even though we can't physically be next to each other right now. And then that's also a great place for them to gather feedback and to show their work creation when they listen to others. That feedback loop will be critical to get good learning for students, and that can be peer to peer, teacher to peer, etc. And that's also a great place to gather feedback. So, how are your lessons going? Um, are they interesting? Are they engaging? I think right now is a really good reminder that we need to stay humble, and with that humility is gaining feedback from students to try to see how we can make this better for them and make it a better learning experience, knowing that we can't be in the classrooms together physically right now. So I want to dive a little bit deeper into this with you to kind of explain and break down each one a little bit more. So when it comes to explaining the objectives, there's a lot of variety of tools and way more tools um, than what I have on this here, but this is kind of some of the ones that my district in Alexandria is focusing on, but screencasting. So screencasting is exactly what I'm doing right now. I'm recording a lesson and I'm going to share it with you, and you can watch it asynchronously. And so asynchronously just means that it's a recorded, somebody can do it later, because obviously we have to be very, very flexible right now with the time that we have with students, because we know that we can't connect with them all synchronously, in person, class to class, real time, like we would normally do. So that screencasting tool that's linked in this presentation goes to Screencastify. That's the one our district has purchased. We really like using it. It's very smooth, very simple, works great with Google. And it gives you a link. You put that on Schoology, you put it on Seesaw, wherever you're going to go with it, and it's awesome to use. So screencasting is a very powerful way to do it. Also, when it comes to screencasting, one of the things that we're doing to help with the synchronous versus asynchronous debate is we will have times where students will have the option to meet with their teacher in person, quote unquote, in real time, synchronously. What we want to do then is we're going to use Screencastify to record that Google Hangout. So that way the students that aren't able to make it during that time are able to watch it later when it works for them, because some of them might be babysitting younger siblings. They have a million reasons why they can't join at 9 a.m. every day. And so we just need to make sure that we have those options for them available. It's also great because if you want to pre-record a couple lessons, if you're breaking it down into bite-sized chunks for kids, it'd be a great way for them, for you to be able to share that learning with people and not have to do it 20 times either. So that's something to think about. Podcasting is a super great way to do it. Podcasting has gotten incredibly popular over the last number of years. And so we actually have students doing that. And the reason why I have podcasting on there is because we used Anchor FM earlier last year with our English classes. And what the students were going to do, they're still doing their short stories, their writing, and things like that. But then the teachers wanted to kind of spice it up a little bit, make it kind of exciting. How can we make it a little bit different instead of just writing that paper again? And so what we decided to do is try to have the students create a podcast on what they were making. And so, and what we ended up finding is as the students were creating the podcast of the paper that they had written themselves, they became a lot better writers. And the reason why they became better writers is because they had to speak their paper out loud over and over again to create that perfect podcast and that perfect recording. And what they were finding was no different than what my mom would tell me when I was in college and I was writing papers. Lucas, read it out loud, and you'll be able to catch those common mistakes and those punctualities that aren't correct. And that works with podcasting as well. They get to listen to themselves. They understand that a punctuality is in the wrong spot and that didn't sound good, or maybe the sentence sounded great in my head, but when I speak it out loud, it doesn't sound as good. So it really, really honed in their writing skills just because they were podcasting it. And along with that, there's a lot of sites that are used for podcasting. Like I said, we used Anchor FM. It was a great one to use. great with students. You can add background music and noises and sound effects. And then we even went as far to have them create their own digital artwork on Canva, and then they could upload that artwork easily to make the cover of their podcast. So it was a great way to do that. It was a lot of fun, and it really turned a regular writing assignment into that redefinition that we previously was inconceivable. We didn't think that we could do that before, and now the kids love it. And we had QR codes posted around the school and the building that people could listen to each other's podcast. So we really just want to make sure that we create that authentic audience as well for students, because that what they create in their product will rise when they know they have an authentic audience. We're using Google Hangouts a lot for these synchronous meetings with people. There's also Zoom and Loom and lots of different other types of ones to use. We're sticking with Hangouts just because it's easy in our district. We're already a Google school. Everyone knows it. Everyone has it. That's a great way to meet synchronously with one another. And something on Hangouts that people get hung up on a lot is, do I have to create a new Hangout every time I want to have a new classroom or every time I want to do something? The answer is no. Once you create the Google Hangout in your calendar, you can take that link for the Hangout, and that's live indefinitely. So if you're going to have first hour every day as an option for that, you can paste that one for everybody, and it will not change, and so you don't have to make new ones all the time. HyperDocs is another great place to go, and I'm actually going to pull this up for us right now. And so as a HyperDoc, you may or may not be familiar with it. Oops, I apologize. That's the wrong video. We don't want that. So as a HyperDoc here, happen is on a HyperDoc is set up essentially like having slides or a Google Doc that you can use to help engage and create student learning opportunities. This one is a prime example from the HyperDoc website. It was made by 3 teachers. It's very, very, very well done. If you have a chance, check that out too. Just Google it. But this is set up so like in a HyperDoc, whether you're using Google Slides or using a doc, you want to make sure that you engage the students. No different than the explain in the model that I showed you first during the slides presentation. So you want to engage them in their learning, hook them, connect with them. It could be a video, it could be an article, it could be you doing something synchronously during Hangouts or Zoom or something like that. How are you going to catch the kids' attention just like you would during a normal class period day? And then what it leads to is exploring and explaining. And so kids have to have time to explore, especially when they're doing things digitally online, and they have to have a place to explain what they're thinking. So really separating it and making sure that you have those boxes and have fun with it. Like, so some of these here, even though it might be kind of hard to see, but I have an underline underneath the S in examples. The box, the X, is bolded. I have different links that go to different things there for people. So kids love that kind of stuff. Makes it kind of like a scavenger hunt that they have to find and search for. A lot of good examples on that can really create some quality student engagement. After they're explaining stuff, it's time for them to apply their learning. So is that on a presentation? Is it on a journal? Is it a discussion? Is it a Flipgrid? Is it like those tools are numerous, but giving them a place to apply it and then really share it. And these last two, or two of these last 3, sorry, sharing and reflecting. So making sure, like we said before, now is more important than ever to make sure that we have video and calls and a place for, and creating space for students to have that engagement time to share with one another because of the mental health issues that we know that we'll face because of the social loneliness and isolation that we're currently experiencing. Even if we weren't in the middle of COVID-19 right now, this part of the sharing it would still be incredibly important to really create that authentic audience for your learners, because we know that the public product rises if they know that there's going to be an audience outside of just the teacher checking it out. Time to reflect is always good. We know that that's a great place to learn. We know that reflection is important in our own learning. It's very, very important in students' learning. And then extending it. So as you're creating these lessons, we know that we have kids that are going to fly through something and get it done in 5 minutes. And we know that we're going to have kids that struggle. The good part is that happens every day in class too. That doesn't change just because we're online. We will have both of those scenarios going on as well. So as Governor Walz once said, don't let great get in the way of good. And so start small, start simple, just get something out there. And this is where I talked about earlier. It's really important to create that feedback loop between you, the students and parents and families, to say, okay, I think something's going to take 20 minutes, this assignment. Well, it might end up being an hour. It might end up being 2 hours. Maybe it ends up being 5 minutes. That's where the humility of it will have to be taking the feedback, using it, and actually applying it for students that way I can create better and more engaging lessons for them online. And so we will have opportunities to create extensions for kids that are flyers. We will have opportunities to extend the learning for those that are struggling. And we'll do that no differently than what we would have done in our classrooms. And so it's just really important to remember to have that as well as you're doing online learning. Next topic is going to be student creation time. And so for student creation time, this comes in a variety of different ways that you can do it. They can use HyperDocs if you have them set up for you. It's okay to just start with a worksheet, even though I know I talked about substitution being the lowest rung of SAMR model. That is okay. You also need to give yourself some grace in learning things, especially during this COVID. We would have had 3 or 4 months of training in order to do the things that we're doing now in a week or less. So allow yourself some grace and allow yourself some time to get better, knowing that you can't master it in a day. You will learn so much as you go. So just rock it, do what you can, start simple. Presentations are a great way to have students show their learning. Google Slides, something like that. Pear Deck. Journaling is awesome. Video editing. We love WeVideo. We have purchased it for our district for several of our grades anyways. But WeVideo, having fun with that. There is a free version of that for students to use as well. And iMovie, if you have iPads and things like that, is also great. But let them be creative in submitting what they get back to you. I think you're going to be really surprised at what they're able to do and what they're able to find and showcase just if they give a little bit. And it really brings me back to that old quote that if you give a little, you can get a lot in return. And that's exactly what we're talking about right now. So if you give up a little bit of the tights, some of the things that we have to do, and let students do it, you're going to get some pretty awesome things in return. And that creative piece, one last thing on it, is that even though I'm filming this during COVID-19, all of this still applies to regular life once things go back to normal when you're creating online learning experiences. But also, the innovative practices and creativity that comes out of COVID-19, not only in the K-12 public education sector, but the world and business, is going to be pretty remarkable. And so that's something to think about. Like, you are going to have so many tools next year when we come back to class, or maybe at the end of this year, depending on how it works, that you'll be able to use. So it will be phenomenal. It will be awesome. And just take a breath and go for it. Last couple slides here. Time to share. So using Flipgrid, if you've never used Flipgrid before, I highly, highly encourage you to check that out. There's a million tutorials online already about Flipgrid, so I won't dive into it, but that is a powerful place for students to create voice and be heard. It's a great place to reflect. It's a great place to share ideas with one another. It's a great place to say, hey, discuss this chapter. What do you think with your partner? A million ideas on Flipgrid. Online discussions by using Schoology or Seesaw or whatever learning management system that you have. You can present online like WebEx, Google Chat, Zoom, a lot of options there. And then having them create screencasts themselves of their work. So if they're going to present to you, it may not be able to be synchronously, so at the same time, but they can certainly record themselves and upload that to you in a multitude of ways. Podcasting, and then OERs, those open educational resources, which I have a list here in a second for you to look at as well. Some flexible learning examples. There's a big list that's linked into here of examples for e-learning days, but that also, even though e-learning and distance learning are very, very different, because one is 1 to 2 days long during a snowstorm, and the other one could be several months worth of how do we actually teach during something like this. But those examples and the tools are very, very similar and often the same. That open educational resources list that's linked here in the presentation, definitely give that a check out. That was made once again with a large handful of tech integrationists around the state of Minnesota, and they are catered to you by subject. So if you're like, I really want to try this, or I need a new website to teach this, check out that list, and there very likely will be some options for you. On that note, though, make sure that you're not going to try to do 30 new things all at once. As we start this, you don't want to have overload for the kids either. And if everyone's trying to do 5 new tools, you're going to have a hard time, get a lot of questions, and your kids are going to struggle, especially in this distance learning model. So make sure that you're intentional with what you use, you're strategic with when you put it out, and that you leave some time to learn the tool inside of your lesson to help them out as well. Lastly, other things to consider. So proper pacing, as I've kind of mentioned a few times throughout this presentation, is you may make something that you think is going to be 20 minutes long, and it very likely may be an hour for kids. And it could go the other way and be 2 minutes. Make sure that you have that feedback loop. You're getting feedback from students and from parents and asking direct questions with, how long did it take you to do this? How did you like it? Was it engaging? Is that kind of hard to hear that feedback sometime? Absolutely, totally agree. But if we don't do that, we won't get better and it won't be the best learning environment that we can possibly create for our students. Multimedia integration is going to be powerful. So the last thing you want to do is do the exact same thing day after day after day. We know that to be true in the classroom as well. And so making sure that when you're doing stuff online and digitally, that you're also leaving room for YouTube videos and for articles and for Flipgrid and for Seesaw and for add different means of multimedia integration to kind of keep it fresh, keep them more engaged as possibly possible. Self-directed learning is probably the biggest one on this list. And so when you're going to go through self-directed learning, the last thing you want to do is get 300 emails from parents and from teachers and from students about, I didn't get this, that didn't make sense, because that is going to be a nightmare for you, and that is going to be a nightmare for the families at home. And so one of the recommendations I have is to lay it out one step at a time. So step one, go to this site. Step two, open up this resource. Step three, watch this video. Step four, um, do this discussion post. Whatever the case is, make sure that it's very self-directed, because that will only make your job easier and it will make the learning easier for the students at home and not cause a bunch of frustration. Community connections is an awesome place. There's a lot of businesses and authors and the DNR and all sorts of entities that are meeting with people online, that are recording themselves, teaching kids how to read or write. Don't be afraid to use those community connections around you, or have that volunteer that was coming into your classroom read a book online. Take that, post it on Schoology or on Seesaw or whatever your learning management system is for those kids. That brings it to be about as normal as it can possibly be for them, and that'll be really important to do as well. Making sure that that's intuitive navigation will ensure that kids understand the flow, where to go, where to find stuff, and that really goes along with self-directed learning. And then the last two, be creative, have fun. You're going to learn new tools and new things like you've never learned before. And you're going to come out a better teacher for this, even though it's really hard to do right now. So, the last thing I wanted to share with you is this infographic. I'll let you guys check that out yourself. It kind of has some of the do's and don'ts that really follows along with the presentation that I just gave you. And so, if you have any other questions, comment below on this YouTube video, and I will do my best to reach out to you. Good luck, everybody. We'll talk to you later.